At the start of March, something happened that most people saw as just another disagreement between governments. But inside military and political circles, it was understood very differently. The United States made a direct request to its allies. Not a suggestion, not a discussion, but a clear call for support in an escalating situation. And the response came back faster than expected. NATO declined. Not partially, not with hesitation, but clearly, publicly, and almost uniformly. This is not NATO's mission. That was the message repeated across capitals. And in that moment, something shifted in a way that does not happen often in global politics. Because for more than 70 years, the assumption behind NATO has been simple. When the United States leads, the alliance follows. That assumption has held through wars, crises, and political disagreements. This time it did not. Within hours, statements began to emerge from across Europe. Germany, France, Italy, and others all emphasized the same point. This conflict was not within NATO's defined responsibility. It was not a collective defense situation. And most importantly, there had been no prior consultation. That last part matters more than anything else, because alliances do not just run on power. They run on process, consultation, agreement, shared planning. Without those, even the strongest alliance does not move. So here is the question that defense analysts and policymakers are now asking: what happens when the most powerful military alliance in the world says no to the country that built it? To understand that, you need to understand what NATO actually is, because it is often described in overly simple terms. NATO is not just a group of countries that agree to fight together. It is a deeply integrated system, a structure built over decades that allows multiple nations to operate as a single force when necessary. It includes shared intelligence networks, coordinated logistics, joint training programs, and standardized military procedures. It allows aircraft from one country to refuel in another, troops to move across borders quickly, and naval forces to operate under unified command. But all of that only works under one condition: alignment. Political alignment, strategic alignment, and above all, trust. Without those, the system does not activate. And what happened at the start of March was a clear signal that alignment was not there. Now look at the sequence of events, because the order is critical. The United States made its request after tensions had already escalated. Military movements were already underway. Decisions had already been made. But those decisions were not made through NATO channels. Allies were not brought into the process early. They were not part of the planning. Instead, they were presented with a situation that had already been set in motion, that changes everything, because there is a difference between being part of a decision and being asked to support it after the fact. One European official described it in very simple terms: you cannot start a process alone and then expect others to join at the final stage. By the time the request came, the political space to say yes was already gone, and that is where the real consequences begin, because NATO's refusal is not just symbolic, it has practical effects. Modern military operations are not designed to be carried out alone. They rely on coordination, surveillance from multiple sources, logistics from multiple regions, naval and air support from multiple countries. Allies are not just additional strength, they multiply effectiveness, they reduce strain, they create flexibility. Without that support, everything becomes harder, operations take longer, resources are stretched thinner, decisions become more constrained. And that strain is already starting to show. Deployment cycles are tightening, equipment is being used more intensively, personnel are under greater pressure. It is manageable for now, but it is not a position designed to last indefinitely. There is also a political layer to this that is just as important. NATO's strength has always been based on unity. The idea that an entire alliance stands together creates a powerful form of deterrence. It sends a message that any challenge will be met collectively, not individually, that unity reduces uncertainty, and in global politics, reducing uncertainty is one of the most valuable things you can do. But when that unity is questioned even slightly, the entire calculation changes, not just for allies, but for everyone watching. Because uncertainty creates opportunity, and right now there is more uncertainty than there has been in years about how this alliance will respond in situations like this. Now here is the part that is often misunderstood. NATO did not refuse because it lacks capability. It refused because it lacked a shared reason. The alliance is designed for collective defense, not for actions that are initiated without consultation. When that line is crossed, the mechanism does not activate automatically, and that brings us to a deeper issue: the difference between leadership and coordination. Leadership assumes others will follow. Coordination requires bringing others along from the beginning. What happened at the start of March was a test of which model was actually in place, and the result was clear. One senior analyst put it very directly: NATO works when decisions are made together, not when they are announced and then supported afterward. That difference may seem procedural, but in practice, it determines everything. Whether the alliance moves, how quickly it moves, and how effective it is when it does. There is also history behind this reaction. NATO has been involved in operations outside its core territory before. But those actions were always preceded by extensive consultation. They were debated, negotiated, and agreed upon. That process took time. Sometimes it created delays, but it ensured unity. This time, that process did not happen. And without it, the outcome we saw was almost inevitable. So where does this leave us? At the start of March, the United States made a request. NATO declined, not out of weakness, but out of structure. The alliance functioned exactly as it was designed to function. It did not move without consensus. The expectation was that the request alone would activate the system. The reality is that the system requires alignment. Before it can move, and without that alignment, even the most powerful alliance in the world remains still. That gap between expectation and reality tells you something important about how power actually works today. It is not just about military strength, it is about coordination. Not just about capability, but about agreement. Because in the end, alliances do not break in dramatic moments. They shift in quiet decisions, a request made, a response given, and a line that once seemed solid revealed to be more conditional than anyone expected. Think about that.